Coming up on the Sky News Daily with me, Niall Paterson, as Israel announces plans for 22 Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank, Sky News speaks to the Israelis resisting the illegal expansion. If Israel is affected by the outpouring of criticism, including from the UK, it certainly isn't showing it. The latest has been prompted by the announcement of 22 new settlements in the occupied West Bank. Settlements seen as illegal by pretty much everyone bar Israel. Truth is, these settlements are nothing new. They've been popping up throughout Israel since 1967. But those in the West Bank and East Jerusalem have been condemned by the United Nations as counter to international law. Meanwhile, Israel says it's disputed territory. But since the Hamas attack on October the 7th, clashes between settlers and Palestinians have increased in number and severity, and Israelis are noticing and resisting. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, and his producer, Orly Halpern, are in Jerusalem, but they recently returned from one of those Palestinian villages being targeted by the settlers. Guys, just tell us exactly what you saw there.
Well, we went to a few of them, but the one where we did most of our filming is a place called al-Ayn in the Jordan Valley. It's a kind of a small community. It's a Bedouin Palestinian community. The people there are farmers and shepherds. They live close together, often in small structures. They have their animals around them, goats, sheep, chickens. It's very, very hot there. The sun is extraordinarily intense. I think when we were there, it must have been in the 40s, and very, very dusty. A really difficult place to live. But they are now finding themselves, their way of life, under threat. They're being harassed by extremist settlers who come there. They set up their outpost next to the community, and then the Palestinians say they are targeted, they're threatened, they're intimidated, and they're harassed. I mean, that's, yeah. Orly, would you say that was a pretty accurate description?
Yeah, when we were there, we had arrived because we went there specifically because we heard that settlers had just arrived to harass them and were actually setting up by plowing land and preparing it. And so by the time we got there, just as we were about to turn into this little hamlet on this dirt road, there was a
group of settlers.
On a pickup truck. Yeah, that were driving out. So we decided to see if we could talk to them, and we went in the direction that they were going, but then we ended up getting harassed by them. So we went back into the hamlet, and the people just talked about their fear. There were Jewish activists there.
Bleak story.
It is. There was a lot of Jewish activists, some that were already there from the morning, and some that had arrived also as soon as they heard. And the people were really scared. It was.
Yeah, they were very frightened.
Situation.
I mean, it was quite clear that they didn't know how much longer they would be able to hold out because of what they described as this campaign of harassment and intimidation and violence.
You guys went to try and speak to this particular group of Israeli settlers. How did that go?
Didn't go well, Neil.
No.
Didn't go well.
It was not fun.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in our job as journalists, you need to try and get a 360-degree understanding of what happens. So, of course, you want to understand what the settlers' motivations are, why they're doing it, and what they're doing. And you also want to put the claims that are being made about them to them. You want to ask them about that. So the settler outpost, it's on a higher ground than the village we went to. So we drove up this kind of winding road towards this settler outpost, and I think we both knew the reaction, the reality. I mean, you have to go and ask.
It was really
ask them, but we knew the reaction that we were going to get. And we drove up there, and really before we even got 200 or 300 meters to the gates of the compound of this illegal settler outpost, lots of these settlers, many of them pretty young, ran out of the gates. Car was blocked. They surrounded us, and it was pretty hostile. It was very intimidating. They went round the front and the back of the car. So
they started banging on the car.
Yeah, so it was very difficult to turn around without hitting one of them. But inch by inch, we managed to do a 3-point turn and leave. But it was clear that they weren't going to talk to us at all. They weren't going to explain, didn't feel that they needed to explain, saw us as the enemy. I mean, take your pick, Neil. But no answers there. But what we did leave with was a kind of, I suppose, a deeper understanding, really, of the climate of fear under which these, and I should stress this, these very vulnerable Palestinian communities are living, because they are vulnerable. And
it really was scary. I mean, it was, I was tense going in there. I knew it was not going to be pleasant. I was surprised how quickly they came down to us. Like, they didn't let us get close at all to the settlement. They just, as soon as they saw, they always set them up, these youth that live in these outposts, they're called
hilltop youth.
They're called hilltop youth, and the reason is because they make the outposts on hilltops, because then they can look down and on the Palestinian villages and more easily attack. And so, they came running down so fast in large numbers before they surrounded us.
Okay, so
it wasn't friendly.
So not much in terms of answers or explanation from those that you spoke to. What do we know truly then of the settler movement? I mean, who are these people? Why are they doing this?
That's a really good question, and it's multi-dimensional in many ways. And I think to understand it properly, you need to rewind back to 1967, when Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights and the Sinai, but put those to a side for the moment. We'll talk about the West Bank. They captured those areas, and at that time you saw what was really a fringe ideological movement being birthed. And some of these settlers moved into the West Bank, and they were driven really for religious and ideological reasons to go and do that. And over the years, it has expanded. Now, if you fast forward to the present day, what human rights activists are saying is that the Israeli government itself no longer looks like any other Israeli government. It has, leading settlers within the government. The ideology is now the fabric of of the Israeli state and all of the apparatus of state as well. So the ones that you're seeing on these hilltops, these are people driven but for religious and ideological reasons. And they believe that settling the West Bank is fulfilling a mandate, really, to reclaim biblical lands.
That this land...
We should say also that there are other settlement blocks, well-established ones now, and people might move to them not because they're ideologically driven, but for economic incentives, tax breaks, for the fact that the housing is cheaper there. But certainly the ones that are setting up and are legal under Israeli law, they're driven by ideology and religion.
Absolutely. I mean, in general, you do have a couple of settler cities like Ariel and Ma'ale Adumim, where there are a lot of non-religious people who don't feel that they need to settle this land because it was given to us by God, to us the Jews, and that it will help bring the coming of the Messiah, according to their beliefs. So you just have people that, like you said, are coming there for cheaper homes because the government subsidizes mortgages and the price of homes, so to encourage people to move there.
With that ideology represented at the very highest levels in the Israeli government then, I mean, what is Israel trying to do with the West Bank? What is the point of all of this?
The point is to push the Palestinians out. We visited Daniela Weiss, who's considered the godmother of the settlement movement. She takes credit in her eyes for 100 of the 330 settlements and outposts that are now in the West Bank. And she said the goal is that they won't be here, that there will never, ever be any Palestinian sort of entity. Essentially, they don't want the Palestinians to live there. They make their lives miserable so that they'll eventually leave. And we see that to a much greater extent right now in Gaza, where life there is just unbearable. I mean, if you manage to stay alive. And many Palestinians in Gaza are saying that they want to leave. And so not to the same intensivity, but that is what's happening in the West Bank.
So this is important, Neil, because obviously the West Bank would be the area that the Palestinians want to make as their own homeland if they ever get the chance for self-determination. So the less of that land that exists, the diplomatic orthodoxy to solve this conflict, the two-state solution, becomes much more difficult. Now, it depends who you talk to. But I mean, some people will say that de facto annexation of the West Bank has already happened. The horse has already bolted from that stable. It's now actually too late. Others say, well, you can pull back. There could be land swaps, all sorts of things, and it could still happen. But it is becoming much more difficult. I think the other thing that's probably worth introducing as well is that obviously the religious and the ideological beliefs of the settler movement are now also overlapping with, and you hear this really more generally in Israel for people who are living the other side of the line, is that after October the 7th, there shouldn't be a Palestinian state anyway. And you'll hear this refrain, well, Israel disengaged from Gaza in 2005. What did we get? We got Hamastan. Why would we pull out of the West Bank and allow another such thing to happen again? So that, that's also bolstering this, religious and ideological argument to drive and push and populate the land of the West Bank, and also the argument that they make to populate the land of Gaza as well.
As we drove around the West Bank, we saw everywhere, like since October 7th, Israel has closed off villages, towns, cities of the West Bank, closing most entrances, leaving one open but with a gate. They have these yellow gates that we saw that were installed everywhere, and movement is so difficult. So the clamp that Israel has now on the West Bank is incredibly tight,
sure,
and suffocating.
But it does feel, though, doesn't it, like the international community is finally sitting up and paying attention to this. Certainly they are speaking with one voice in increasingly condemnatory tones about the actions being taken in the West Bank. I mean, is anyone in the Netanyahu government likely to listen?
I think that's a really good question. And I think the answer, if I had to answer yes or no, is probably no.
I would agree. Absolutely.
Obviously, Israeli, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, to keep his coalition together, needs to keep on sides these very extremist settler ministers within the government. So it's hard to see, without the government collapsing, him changing direction at all. Is that fair?
Yeah, they're not going to change the direction and start allowing the development of a Palestinian state or cutting down on the expansion of settlements. Just the opposite. That is essentially what his coalition wants.
But I think we also need to say it has also been the direction of travel for not the last few years, but years. It's been going in that direction.
And absolutely. And now it's just accelerated. October 7th is like an excuse for the settler movement to expand and act with impunity.
Alex, Orly, thanks very much indeed. You can watch more of Alex's journey through the West Bank on the website, skynews.com. If you're listening to the podcast on Thursday evening at around about 9 p.m, my colleague Jada Hakim is hosting a special programme on Gaza, so tune in for that. The Sky News Daily is back tomorrow.
The first 100 days might be over, but President Trump is showing no signs of slowing down.
America will soon be greater than ever before.
So we're continuing to follow every twist and turn of this remarkable presidency.
And trying to make sense of what it all means for the US and for the rest of the world.
So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Malta Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Sky News Trump 100, wherever you get your podcasts.